Don in London. Hello, February the 8th, 2013. My video is all about recovery from addiction to either substances or behaviour. And in my case, my addictive substance was alcohol. So I'm an alcoholic in recovery for some time. And I share experience, strength and hope of how it works for me. And how it works for me, I needed professional help and some other things which I haven't forgotten. So this video is really about lest I forget what happened to me. What happened in the last days of drinking and the first days of recovery. And this month it's all about recovery and being back and restored to sanity, just one day at a time. So today, February the 8th, yes. What helped me most? Well, certainly professionals got me on track with what it was like to be dry, but then to be full of fear and then what to do next. They all suggested there was only one place I could go, and that was the Fellowship of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, a place which I didn't want to go because it was going to take my best friend away forever. But it didn't. It didn't take it away forever. It just took it away for a day. Or rather, gave me a mindset, a way of being open, honest and willing to be myself and stop fearing life and stop having to find oblivion from the hell I used to live. So the Fellowship of AA, I don't speak for it, I just share how it helps me, and the same applies to anybody in it. They share where they will about their recovery, and under the banner of anonymity, it's a safe place to find out who you are today. And that's a free person. AA, common ground, and then everyone has their own beliefs and opinions and their lives to lead. So it's not joining a cult, it's joining a place where you can be sober so the rest of life can happen. And you'll meet all sorts in AA, people you like and people you don't like. That's life. But I take away the experience, strength and hope which works for me. So I share from this little book here, the little book of AA, what the AA preamble says, shared at the beginning of every meeting, to alert people to what is going on, even for old-timers or day-timers like me. So Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not, but you may be. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes, including my videos. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And I was asked to do these videos because sometimes it's a lonely business and you can't get out, or you're far away from meetings, or you just don't know what AA may be about. So somebody in the National Health Service in the UK said, make a few videos, see if you can get a message out there. And that's what I've been doing. So sometimes it works and I share a message which works. Sometimes I share a message which won't work for you. That's how it is. Because if you can't understand the person who's talking to you, find another person. And within the Fellowship of AA, you will find every sort of person imaginable. But it's all about sober. If sober works today, I've got a free life. I can do what I want. Well, within reality, of course. And that's the whole thing. Reality works. And I can cope with it most of the time. And that's because I go to a place where I can be myself and then learn how to be myself today in the rest of life. And that's how it works for me. And I'm going to share some reflections which I've just written, because this month is all about being restored to sanity, which is the second step in the 12-step program, as it's called, or 12 principles of living, which keep me able to be myself and cope. So sanity is what it's all about for me in February. Came to believe that a power greater than me could restore me to sanity. And the higher power for me is the truth, love and wisdom shared in the fellowship, and the truth, love and wisdom shared everywhere else. And sometimes it's not truth, it's not love, and it's not wisdom, and then we have to use our own feeling and thinking brain to work out what is best for us. It's about freedom of choice based on reality. So that's what fellowship does for me, and today this is what I was thinking about, lest we forget. One of my favourite meetings in my area is called Lest We Forget, a turbulent and difficult meeting on a Sunday night, where we get every type of personality you can imagine, from all over the world because it's London. And they know the meeting is called Lest We Forget, because it says so in the AA handbook for where to find meetings in London. And because local people are forgetful, most of the locals who will go to the meeting have forgotten the name of the meeting. If you ask them what the name is, and even the secretary will have forgotten that it's Lest We Forget. So we are forgetful. So some of the time we are forgetful of what will happen in the insanity, and the insanity which can happen on the way to a drink. So often when we get to the point, got it years ago, I relapsed on rage and anger, which had been building for several months, and this is why. Years ago I was offered a place in rehab, St. Luke's Mission in Kennington. It has been closed for some years. Some people liked it and other people hated it, like me. A recycled building with many past uses, including being a hospice. And it also had a morgue where I used to do relaxation therapy. The way it was managed and the therapeutic processes were very unclear to me. Both management and councillors seemed to be at odds with each other, and their disruptive behaviour and attitudes did more to scar the inmates than help them. It certainly scarred me. When I was there for a few months, it was shocking from the start, and then just got worse, each day a lesson in incremental torture. It seemed to me to be the opposite of fellowship, where fellowship is about love, rehab was about hate. I endured the madness of rehab to my term. I agreed to be there for 13 weeks and 1 day. And then I was told I needed to stay longer to get better. And actually it was a cheap place to house me, because I was homeless by this stage. Yeah. If ever there were a regime designed to encourage relapse by the inmates, St. Luke's Mission achieved the job with alarming success. So lest I forget, St. Luke's Mission, a rehab which encouraged hate and confrontation, versus the fellowship of AA, which encourages love and inclusion. At all costs, when I was in rehab, I went to meetings of AA, meetings of NA, CODA, anything which was about recovery, love and inclusion, which was the direct opposite of what the rehab was doing. The more I went to fellowship, the more I saw the terrible difference and the wounding of people in St. Luke's. If St. Luke's was designed to ego puncture, which is something which is good, and encourage humility, the twisted therapists and councillors harmed the already insane inmates 1 day at a time. And they thought confrontation was the answer. It wasn't a process intervention, as it's sometimes called, it was just hell on earth. I self-discharged from rehab, and when you self-discharge from rehab and you have no means, you get cut off completely. So I self-discharged from rehab, St. Luke's Mission, and went straight to the market and bought the only thing that would bring me oblivion from the pain, the emotional pain I was in: alcohol. I've never been a person of hate, and I could not comply to the rehab and how it was being run and what they were doing to us. They were pitting us against each other, and they were dishonest brokers, and they wanted us to be dishonest. The more you tried to be open and honest about your background, the more you seemed to get hit by confrontations, which was humiliating and not creating humility. So I couldn't comply, and the good news in all of this, even though I relapsed, which is very common and expected, it was made worse by the steady stream of newcomers always available. So there's always a queue to come into these places because it was cheap, and it was cheap, and it housed people who could not be housed anywhere else. So we were all pretty much bonkers by the time we got there. And if you stepped out of line, not to have a drink, but if you just stepped out of line, you found yourself being bound in contracts of behaviour, which went against whatever the mission had decided at the beginning was the contract. So it was dishonest. The good news in all of this, even though a relapse, which was very common and expected, it was made worse by me knowing there was a steady stream of newcomers coming in, because I saw people self-discharge and head for the hills, and they were always in hell. And then for me, homeless without a voice for a long time, hiding, isolating, until that fateful meeting with the professor of psychiatry. He was walking his professor of psychiatry walking his dog on the Fulham Road, and I bumped into him and asked him for help, and he said he couldn't help me, I ought to go to AA. It made me very angry at the time, but I hadn't forgotten just how helpful all the people in fellowship were, and they had love in their hearts, well, maybe love most of the time, but I was driven to hide, lest I forget the insanity of doing the same old, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, and expecting a different result. And there I was, homeless and hiding. Yeah, I was so traumatised by rehab. I needed respite from the cure they offered. I needed oblivion. And then an opportunist moment of clarity by the professor reminded me I had become a homeless person and needed simple nurturing one day at a time. Would I have made it if I had stayed in the rehab? By all accounts, and by the reckoning of medical minds far superior to me, who looked me over afterwards, I would have perished had I stuck with it. It was a regime of hate and humiliation, not humility, which is about opening up. I don't forget those ugly times of horror, and with kindness of people in the homeless unit, which is where I was directed after going to the emergency unit of the hospital, because they said you can't be on the streets anymore, you'll die. So I just said, I don't know what to do, please, anything. I was crying, actually. I remember I was sobbing, because it's the first time in a long time someone was being kind to me, even though I was drinking. They didn't judge me on that. Or maybe they did, I don't know. I didn't cry for effect, I just couldn't stop it. I was so broken down. And even just an iota of kindness hurt as much as it was helping. Yeah. They eventually found me a roof over my head, and I hit the meetings as often as possible, simply to be in the company of people in recovery who loved me enough and accepted me enough to be back on the road of recovery, always one day at a time. When I look back at the roof over my head, I mean the initial one, Cartwright Hotel of death, and then the one where I ended up in a squalid rundown hotel, full of people like me. I had a bed, a fridge and a wash basin, and friendly mice for company. It was riddled with mouses. And the meetings all around me, the sponsorship, or rather the fellowship of AA, the meetings surrounded where I was, and maybe that's why they put me in this squalid hotel. But then it had to shut down because it was so bad. Then I had to go somewhere else, and then somewhere else, and then somewhere else. I stayed sober though. Yep. Recovery is as hard as it gets without all the other stuff going on, so I don't forget where I came from and where I am today. Years of hiding and isolating, years of pretending to the world they couldn't hurt me. I had no idea who they might be. It turned out they I referred to were all the people who wanted to help me make it into recovery, and they did the best they could with what they had. And this applies to homeless units, because there are so many homeless people and it's so expensive. They have to go for the cheapest option, which is hopefully a roof without a leak. And oddly, I'm one of them now, free to make my own personal choices, live the life which is possible simply by being sober today. You know, it's difficult, it's so hard to understand that people are not against us, it's that we behave so badly, and we get this idea in our heads that we have an entitlement to something. Well, by the time I got to living on the streets, I'd forgotten any idea of entitlement or rights, because I didn't know anymore. But actually I did have rights and entitlements, but I chose just to say, and this is the truth of it, because I didn't know what to do, and I just said simply, anything, please, go along with anything. Medical people said, don't go back to rehab, because it'll kill you. But if you can get to meetings, it will save you one day at a time. They're new enough. You know, people aren't daft. And they know the impossibility of stopping on your own, because it's so hard. Anyway, going on, as I do. St. Luke's mission, in my opinion, the hateful people who ran it, they mistook humiliation for humility. And even though I was isolated for a long time, I learned in fellowship that if I were to stay alive, I needed to ask for help. And the help would be as good as it could be based on reality. So, I just heard recently homeless people are going into 4-star hotels because there's just absolutely nothing else. Thank God for that. Places where I was put, that were in the process of being shut down because they were just derelict. But I needed to ask for help, and I don't care now. I was living a derelict life, and now I'm not. So I needed to ask for help, and the need would be as good as it could be based on reality. The cost of a roof over my head, even though it was squalid, was enough for me back then. And then in fellowship, love and inclusion. This is fellowship, this is how it works. Love and inclusion. And love comes in different ways. Sometimes it feels a bit tough. You know, when you're penniless and you're eating all the biscuits, someone will say, don't put money in the pot, eat biscuits, and try and buy some proper food with the little amount you've got going. And you see, ego told me I needed to put money in the pot, which is just to help 20 pence, a few cents, half a euro, whatever it is. Because my pride said, you know, I'm in a fellowship which relies on its own people to run it and have enough money to pay the rent. So I still had a lot of pride going on somewhere. Yeah, I don't have that pride now. Cost of the roof over my head, even though it was squalid, was enough for me back then. And in fellowship, love and inclusion, a way forward was enough just to keep me going one day at a time. I saw many go back to drink, and this is true, because, you know, how to give up your best friend. And I lived with them for a long time, and these are in the hotels, the rundown places, stuffed to the gills with people who were trying to get sober, people who couldn't get sober. I kept sober with the help of fellowship and like-minded souls. As I made friends in fellowship, simply people on the same journey, same path and same day. The insanity of drink and not being able to stop is so lonely and dreadful. And seeing it sober and all around me, I will never forget those times, and sadly those times are still around me today. You know, the problems haven't gone away in society, they're just compounded by depression and everything that's going on, self-medicating, often turning to self-harm and addiction. Anyway, that was years ago. I can still recollect many moments of torture, not about me drinking, simply not being able to help others in my predicament on my own. In fellowship, it is always the many voices of people who share their experience, strength and hope, who make the difference today, eventually by listening to everyone and hearing the wisdom flying around me, sometimes so profound and then other times so wrong for me. Wrong for me and yet right for others. It's true. And this is how it works. We find like-minded people sharing experience, strength and hope which we understand in our own way. And there will always be people we don't understand, and others who do. We found out what works one day at a time, and then we work it, because we are all worth it today. It took me a while to realise that it was okay to be me, that I had an affliction or malady which caused me to become an alcoholic. We don't know we are addicted until it's too late, and then the impact. So many say how many die. Statistics are so how many do die? I don't know. Statistics are unreliable, and recovery for each individual is as reliable as it can be for one day. You know, the odds are stacked against us to try to do it on our own, or go to part-time support and help. The good news about fellowship, it's there pretty much 24/7 once you're in it, because you can always make a telephone call. And my average is 1 in 10 calls may be answered by someone who's still awake or still capable of listening. So it's haphazard. It just is. We're human. We're not perfect. So there's no perfect recovery. We all are in progress. And the more we are alive, progressing, the more profound our foundations become. But it doesn't mean we're immune. So a lot of people do die. To experience new living, a new way of coping with reality, and being able to make choices freely to the good of living, I never imagined I would ever be free and have the freedom to work out what I can do, what I cannot do, and keep on learning the wisdom and the difference one day at a time. So it's Friday, it's bright out. There's a meeting in an hour. That time I went. So I always end my videos, lest I forget where I came from. It was horrible. And before that, very successful. But once you're on the slippery, slidey slope of economic downfall, you're stuffed. And I couldn't cope, nervous breakdown, you name it, it happened. And it was horrible. It happens to people because we're human. And coming out of this, the other side, it takes time to allow yourself to feel the pain and to find that the pain goes. And we get to a place of love and cherishing people. We don't treat ourselves superficially or indifferent like we used to. You know, we're not throwaway people anymore in recovery. And people who are in active addiction are not throwaway people either. They are unwell. I was, and I'm reasonably well now. So that's how it happens, from insanity to sanity. What helps in fellowship? Always the serenity prayer shared at the end of the meeting. It's a recitation, but it's there to remind me of can do, can't do. And that's where it sticks for me. So the serenity prayer to the God of your understanding, the good of your understanding, or whatever your personal beliefs are, because those are the ones which are going to work for you. God to God, all good. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. In the moment, in the minute, by the hour, and just for today.